Tara Brown and the Swinging London Colour Revolution by Vic Chanham. Chapter 13, Part 1. Back from their North American tour in early September, the Beatles stopped being a live act. My intermittent appearances as Paul as well. Oh well, it had been fun while it lasted. The Fab Four, the reason almost anything we were doing was granted consent by authorities, were going to be a full-time studio band, focusing on improving their music beyond easy listening chart stormers. Rubber Soul had been an early intent. In My Life was definitely an odd but gripping Beatles song. Now there was a new album out, Revolver, going further in that line. While I liked the music, I worried about Paul. Was he really into this change? Was this the road he wanted to go with his music? It seemed to suit John and George more. Would Paul be able to maintain his profile in the band? I couldn't show any proof at the time, but I felt unease. Like Brian, Paul might be in for some hard times in the band he had formed. Amid this pondering, Paul got lost. He had told me about his anxieties once, how he feared he might have to die young. That's what he said. I might have to. I remember I found that a strange choice of words, and also that I hadn't known how to react, other than pulling up my shoulders and remarking, "Many people with exciting lives feel they may die young. I myself, for one." It came back to me when Paul wouldn't show up after their return. Nobody in my scene had seen any of them, in fact. They must be exhausted and have taken a break, was the consensus on the dance floor. But when the other Beatles reappeared, affirming sotto voce that their performing days were indeed over, Paul stayed lost. His brother Mike didn't seem to know either, or else he wouldn't tell me. And then he was presumably spotted at some workshop, having fun with percussion and being very much himself, only to fly the next day to Paris with Brian Epstein, where they would meet John, who was in between shootings for the film he was to play a soldier in. Many of us found that a bit odd. John Lennon a soldier? I believe it was Mick Jagger who said it was all part of the ever-expanding marketing operation they were running. "So, what's your adventure going to be?" somebody asked him. "A serial killer hunting down old ladies?" "I might," laughed Mick, with that overstretched grin of his. "I might just as well." All fun aside, Paul stayed out of sight, and even George Harrison, who wasn't the type to indulge in secrecy, couldn't provide an answer. He may have gone to Liverpool to visit his old man, for all I know. With nobody knowing much or anything, rumors inevitably started spreading. There had been a heavy car crash on the evening of 11 September. The identity of the driver, who had died in the frontal shock, was unknown. Though reports of the make were not conclusive, it had been a fine sports car he was driving, so he must certainly have been a man of means. Could it have been Paul? I didn't like the rumor at all, for obvious reasons, but the longer he stayed away, the harder it became not to give in. On one of my visits to Paris, Amanda and I went to Chez Castel, a happening nightclub with restaurant and dance floor where the beau monde met. Brian was also in town, and we had agreed to see each other there. At the table next to us, the painter Salvador Dalí was seated with his entourage. And when he heard Brian Jones was in the house, he had to meet us. He was as crazy as people said he was, but very witty, and we were laughing all the time. Then, when we said our goodbyes, he invited us all over for lunch the following day, and Amanda and I accepted. That was a big mistake. Or perhaps it was just fate. Dali was all eyes and ears for Amanda, while ignoring me completely. Little by little, he started mesmerizing her. And hey, he was one of the biggest names of the 20th century. If having Dali's attention was good for her career, who was I to say she shouldn't accept his advances? We were not living like that at all in those days. It just meant we were slowly being torn apart by forces too strong to withstand. While we would be seeing each other a few more times after that, it was at this weekend in September that I started losing Amanda to Dali. And then we had to be present when Jimi Hendrix was presented to London at Blazes, where he picked up a guitar and played the Jimmy James way. Irrespective of the way my relationship with Amanda was dissolving, I decided to file for divorce. I still liked Nikki a lot. We had both been very young when we met and had grown up together, but we were not living as husband and wife, and it just didn't seem to make much sense to be married any longer. Of course, bringing up divorce would also raise the question of custody for Dorian and Julian, and I was fully aware that my mother planned to play a very active role in providing the right answer. In a way, I wanted her to get the boys. They were safe at Lugala, or wherever they happened to be, London, Paris, the Côte d'Azur, all the places I used to go with her, and they seemed happy with her. Why keep our marriage going only to avoid the custody question while we were both glad we didn't have to be responsible for them? It didn't add up. Cut the chaff. Life should be simple, so it can be lived with a smile. The only thing I concerned myself with was trying to make the whole affair as swift and painless as possible, to protect both Nikki's and my feelings. Unfortunately, it would turn out rather differently. And then there was the autumn issue of Men in Vogue, for which we had done a photo shoot back in March. We were going to be totally hip that autumn. Brian, Anita, Nikki and I were starring in a photo reportage for Men in Vogue, a London edition quarterly of the Vogue Imperium that lasted just about the op art years. It was all done in spring, but only now ready for release. Brian and I dressed up as men who were dressed up by their girlfriends, and the idea was that this would lead to a more adventurous choice of clothes. Anita put Brian in a gangster suit with white shoes, and Nikki got me a chestnut suit and a gold shirt. Pretty cool. The girls did us first, and then they did themselves, and we ended up on 2 full-page photos. Brian and Anita were doing something artistic, like walking away from each other, whereas Nikki and I were just a perfect version of ourselves. I was resting my elbow on my strong wife's shoulder, sticking out my hip like few married men could, and both of us were looking into the camera as if we were on acid. We weren't, but we had decided on the look beforehand. We looked ridiculously happy at a time when we had already begun giving each other space. Now we were fighting the other over custody. Nikki wanted to keep the boys, even though they would need full-time care. To me, it seemed mostly a matter of pride. They're happy there, I said. They like living with their grandmother. So what? We let it happen. Live with it. That was the wrong sentence. Live with it? Are you mad? You let it happen perhaps, but I sure didn't. You found solutions which excluded you, as they did me. We haven't been good parents, dear. Grandmother has more money. She buys them better nannies. You don't think she's turning them against us? I hope not. Nikki sniggered. That's a fucking weak answer, love. I was also going to get involved in fashion in a serious way, which in my life meant financial involvement. Being 21 years of age, I had acquired some possessions which were emitting dividends, and I thought it only natural to invest those in my life, which meant my environment, my circumstances, so to speak. And then I would be happy in my circumstances. I had been with a tailor since summer, a certain Pop Foster, and while we sold well, we needed a business, a workshop with outlet to increase our turnover. Dandy fashions was my target. It was a business I was trying to set up simultaneously with the idea of merging both operations. The name was mine and some of the money, but the work came from other people. We were serious though, and it looked like we could have something workable. Guys with money having a chop at the fashion market. I believe that's what it was. With my divorce proceedings running, my cars even more popular than I was, businesses I was involved in popping up everywhere, I felt I was clearing up my life. The Honourable Party Tiger Tara Brown is now investing in his neighbourhood. Keep London swinging, his motto reads. Too bad Amanda couldn't be a part of it, but maybe that was for the better. I was not meant to be the husband of a superstar, and Amanda was going far, one could feel when she was around. 1966 had been a year of change and growth for me, and while it wasn't over yet, I already knew 1967 was going to be a year of consolidation and sustainability. I should drop less acid, perhaps. Mid-November, I was approached by Sir John. We hadn't spoken since I was ordered to be Paul on top of the pops. My report on New York had been in writing. Despite growing interest in what was going on across the pond, London was still swinging, and I, though not as vital for its rise as I once may have been, still played my role as all-around fun and peacemaker. I contributed my grain, as they say in Spain, and I was enjoying the fruits of that good work. In the eye of outsiders who were desperately trying to get in, there were still plenty of reasons to consider London's pulse as the world's heartbeat. Yet there had been a spark missing recently. With Paul gone, people sensed unease. It wasn't spoken about in polite conversation, but quite a few accepted that something wasn't right. And it wasn't just Paul, it was as if the times were changing. John Lennon had met Yoko Ono, and his grumpy sense of humor was quite suddenly being substituted for emotional honesty. I guess that was okay in itself, but somehow the fun seemed over. Nobody was laughing. Was it the drugs? Acid had been losing its original appeal for quite some time now, and the idea of being high all the time itself had come into question. It was okay to be clean large part of the day, the latest fashion said. Was it the alcohol, the early morning glasses, the sinking in alcoholic stupor every night? Was it the same old, same old? The autumn of 1966 had a gloomy feel over it. Not necessarily bad. There was still a lot of change in the air, lots of expectation. I myself was kept busier than ever, but the joy we had felt when setting the 60s in motion was clearly on a downward trajectory. Maybe we were getting blasé. Maybe we were being manipulated into the next phase. I somehow knew I was in for a treat and approached our reunion with unease. Do you know what happened to Paul McCartney? Asked Sir John right after we were seated. I haven't seen him for a while, I answered with curiosity. I can't seem to contact him. I've been asking round a bit, but nobody knows much. Aren't there any rumours going round? Well, yes, some say he's left the band. Some claim he is dead. Others are sure they've seen him recently in some staged event. To be sure, I am one of those. I'm quite positive I saw him driving an Aston Martin DB5, the one James Bond has, the other day in Knightsbridge. I believe it was a dark green. I remember being a bit surprised he hadn't consulted me, but the 5 is a good choice, of course. It was him all right, confirmed Sir John. The board were not at all pleased with his act, but deemed it forgivable. Let me give you the story. Paul McCartney had indeed left the Beatles, not by his own free will, but because the society to which Sir John belonged had decided his time was up. McCartney was considered traditional, a sweet character who loved happy melodies. The new era around the corner was going to be much more serious. Love or nothing was the slogan. You either dug love or you were an incurable loser. Love was whatever coat you hung it on. Music had to become more serious as well, to sustain this new sense of urgency. Orchestration was the coming fancy. They would start off with lots of violins and pianos and brass sections, the odd triangle not to be excluded, and when the ongoing experiments with semi-automatic organs bore fruit, those would be incorporated as well. We don't think Paul is the right guy for this transition, explained Sir John, but we need the Beatles to be on the forefront a while longer. There's no band even closely as influential as they are, so we need a new Paul. We have found him already, of course. He's busy working on the next album, which should be released next summer. He's a very good all-round musician, and we hope he will inspire John and George to put in an effort. He's from Liverpool as well, curiously, and he looks somewhat like Paul. He's right-handed, though, but we think he can learn to play some simple melodies with his left hand. People are not going to fall for that, I interrupted. You think so? They fell for you. Sir John was right. That had been my role, to test the waters. But that was a bit of a joke, and there were circumstances. We would have explained all if someone had noticed. You can't explain a full substitution. We won't have to, though we might, nevertheless. This is why we are going to push the car accident story. Was it Paul? Did he die? It's just a rumor, of course. Officially he is alive and well. Meanwhile, your friend will be shipped off to a place where no one will find him, ever. He will return in the public eye sometimes, especially this winter when people are still used to him, to be himself until the time has come to fade out and let the public get used to the impersonator Paul. At first safely hidden behind the beard craze that will get all four Beatles in its hold. Fall, I said. People call him Fall. Sir John smiled at my suggestion. It has been noticed. To continue, when the real Fall retires somewhere in the future, we may bring old Paul back in, friendly senior, claiming to be the author of music he never wrote. Sir John laughed loudly and nastily. When he saw my look, he fumbled in his pocket and took out his packet of cigarettes, apparently the only thing he had on offer as a piecemeal. Have some, he offered clumsily. I took out 2 cigarettes, one for behind my ear and one for now. Being a lifelong mentholated smoker, these naturals still hit out at me every time. I said, you know, my mentholated are like smoking in the bathroom, while yours are like smoking on the balcony. In the office, my friend, corrected Sir John. Smoking is a business proposition in my circles. In mine as well, in fact, I laughed. Don't worry, the master of ceremonies assured me. Paul will be all right where he is, and he won't be alone. Many went before him. The storyline was dazzling to me, so I put up my sharpest reply. And because you still needed him for a handful of public appearances, you could only start rumoring his death later on. That is correct. It may even take a few years before the story reaches the larger public, but that is fine. Let it simmer. Should I help promoting it then? I asked. Sir John's detailed description had reinforced my initial sense of unease. This was not simply promoting a band and lying about authorship. This was identity theft. Paul was being stripped of his personality, his history, his fame. I pictured him to be the same old Paul in his hideout, but without the world to witness. Whoever these people were Sir John was representing, they were ruthless and powerful.